Your son isn't fit for this tour. He wouldn't understand anyway. This is for children who actually have a future in the business. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at my brother Drake, standing there in his $300 pocket square, and smiled. If you've ever been told your child wasn't good enough, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you how my family forgot who actually built their empire. The Hammond Family Printing Company had been in operation for 62 years. 3 generations of Hammonds had walked through those factory doors, breathed in the sharp tang of industrial ink, and called it legacy. My grandfather started it in 1962 with a single offset press and a dream about making the family name mean something. By the time I was born, it meant something all right. It meant holiday dinners where my father Gerald talked about nothing but quarterly reports. It meant summers spent folding brochures while my younger brother Drake played baseball in the backyard. It meant being told over and over again that the business was everything. Drake was 4 years younger than me. Golden child doesn't begin to cover it. When I graduated high school with a 4.2 GPA, my father nodded and asked if I'd considered a nice secretarial program. When Drake graduated with a 2.8, there was a party, 50 guests. A banner that read, "Future CEO," strung across the back patio. I went to law school, paid for it myself, $187,000 in student loans that I spent 8 years paying off. I specialized in intellectual property, patent law, the kind of work that requires precision, foresight, and the ability to see 5 moves ahead. Drake went to business school. Dad paid every cent. $52,000 a year for 4 years, plus the apartment, plus the car, plus the spending money. When he graduated, there was a corner office waiting for him at Hammond Printing. I never got an office. I never got an invitation to join the company at all. My mother Patricia had a way of explaining this that made it sound reasonable. The business needs strong male leadership, she'd say, patting my hand like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. You'll find something else. You're so smart. You'll be fine. I was fine. More than fine, actually. By 28, I was a senior associate at one of the top patent firms in the state. By 30, I'd made partner. By 32, I'd built a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. And somewhere along the way, I'd done something else. The Hammond Family Printing Company had a problem. The printing industry was changing. Digital was eating the world, and small family operations were getting crushed. But Dad had an idea. Specialty processes. Proprietary techniques that could produce things no one else could. Security printing, tamper-evident materials. The kind of work that government contracts paid premium for. The problem was, Dad didn't know how to patent any of it. I did. It started innocently enough. Dad mentioned the issue at a family dinner in 2019. Drake was too busy checking his phone to pay attention. Mom was clearing plates. But I listened. The processes are good, Dad said, rubbing his temples. But anyone could copy them. We need protection, but the lawyers I've talked to want $70,000 just for the initial filing. I said I'd take a look. Pro bono. For family. I didn't just take a look. I spent 3 months documenting every innovation Hammond Printing had developed over the past decade. I found 12 patentable processes. 3 of them were genuinely brilliant, Dad's work, refined through years of trial and error. I filed the patents. All 12 of them. The filing fees alone came to $14,000. I paid them out of my own pocket. Never mentioned it to anyone. But here's the thing about being a patent attorney. You learn very quickly that ownership matters. And you learn how to structure ownership in ways that protect everyone involved. I created a shell company called Meridian Intellectual Holdings, LLC. On paper, it looked like a standard patent holding company, the kind of entity that thousands of businesses use to manage their IP portfolios. I was listed as the managing member. The patents were assigned to Meridian. Then Meridian licensed the patents to Hammond Family Printing Company. The licensing agreement was generous. Below market rates, favorable renewal terms, a 5-year initial period with automatic renewal clauses that any reasonable business would accept without question. Dad signed the agreement without reading past the first page. Drake wasn't even in the room. That was 2019. By 2024, those 3 core patents had become the backbone of Hammond Printing's competitive advantage. The specialty security printing, the tamper-evident materials, the proprietary coding process, that work accounted for 68% of the company's revenue, and every single bit of it ran through licensing agreements that I controlled. I never asked for recognition. I never asked for a corner office or a seat at the table. I just kept paying the filing fees, managing the renewals, and watching my family build their fortune on the foundation I'd laid. Drake, meanwhile, had become CEO, not because he'd earned it, not because he'd shown any particular aptitude for leadership or innovation or hard work. He became CEO because Dad retired at 65 and handed him the keys. The announcement was made at a family dinner. There was champagne. There were speeches. Drake stood at the head of the table in a suit that cost more than my first car and talked about continuing the legacy and honoring our father's vision. No one mentioned the patents. No one mentioned me. I sat at the end of the table with my son Marcus, who was 10 years old and the best thing that had ever happened to me. His father had left when Marcus was 2. Couldn't handle the pressure of raising a child with learning differences, he said. Couldn't handle the responsibility? I could handle it. I handled everything. Marcus had dyslexia. It took us 3 years and $40,000 in specialists to get a proper diagnosis and support plan. By 10, he was reading at grade level. He was curious, kind, and obsessed with how things worked. He loved visiting factories, loved seeing the machines, loved asking questions that the workers were always happy to answer. He asked me once if he could visit Grandpa's printing company. I said I'd arrange it. The company had a tradition. Every summer, they did a future leaders tour for the children and grandchildren of Hammond family members. Drake's 3 kids attended every year. They got hard hats with their names embroidered on them. They got certificates of participation. They got photos with the machines that ended up in the company newsletter. Marcus had never been invited. I told myself it was an oversight. The first year, he was too young. The second year, the dates didn't work out. The third year, the fourth year, I made excuses for them. I was good at making excuses, but Marcus was 10 now. He was old enough. And he'd asked. I called Drake's office in June. His assistant, Pamela, told me she'd pass along the message. A week went by. I called again. Another week. I sent an email. Finally, Drake called me back. Prue, he said. He'd called me that since we were kids, even though I hated it. Got your messages. What's up? The Future Leaders Tour, I said. Marcus would like to attend this year. There was a pause. I could hear him tapping something, probably that ridiculous Mont Blanc pen he carried everywhere. Yeah, about that, Drake said. I'm not sure that's the best fit. Not the best fit, I repeated. Look, the tour is pretty technical. Lots of information about the business, the processes, the future direction. The other kids, they're being groomed, you know? They're going to be part of this someday. Marcus, he's a great kid, but what? He wouldn't understand anyway, Prue. This is for children who actually have a future in the business. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. It's not personal, Drake added. It's just practical. Of course, I said. My voice was steady. I understand completely. I hung up the phone. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Marcus. He was working on a model airplane, his tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully applied glue to a tiny plastic wing. Mom, he said without looking up, did Uncle Drake say yes about the tour? I looked at my son, my brilliant, curious, determined son who had worked twice as hard as any other kid just to keep up, who had never once complained about the extra tutoring or the specialized reading programs or the way some teachers looked at him like he was a problem to be solved. Not this year, sweetheart, I said. He nodded slowly. His hands kept working on the airplane, but I saw his shoulders drop. Maybe I can go next year, he said, when I'm better at stuff. Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a clean, quiet break. You're not bad at stuff, Marcus, I said. You're good at exactly the right things. He looked up at me then, and I saw it in his eyes. The same look I'd seen in the mirror for 30 years. The look of someone who'd been told they weren't enough. I was done pretending this was okay. The licensing renewal was due in October, 4 months away. I opened my laptop and began to type. The email to Drake was 3 sentences. Dear Mr. Hammond, Meridian Intellectual Holdings. LLC is initiating a comprehensive review of all licensing agreements with Hammond Family Printing Company. Please expect formal correspondence regarding renewal terms within 90 days. Regards, Prudence Hammond, Managing Member. Asterisk, I didn't sign it as his sister. I signed it as what I was, the person who controlled the foundation his entire business stood on. The next morning, I drove to my office and pulled the licensing files. 5 years of below-market rates. 5 years of automatic renewals that Hammond Printing had never questioned because they'd never had to. 5 years of my family building their legacy on terms so generous they bordered on charity. The current rate was $47,000 annually for the full patent portfolio. 12 patents. 3 of them critical to 68% of their revenue. I ran the numbers on comparable licensing agreements in the security printing industry. Companies with similar patent portfolios were charging between $180,000 and $240,000 per year. Some were charging percentage royalties, 3 to 5% of revenue generated using the patented processes. I've been giving my family a 90% discount for 5 years. I drafted the new terms on a Tuesday night while Marcus slept down the hall. The base licensing fee would increase from $47,000 to $156,000 annually. Still below market rate, but no longer a gift. The renewal period would shorten from 5 years to 2, and there was a new clause, a morality provision that allowed termination of the license if any Hammond family member engaged in discriminatory conduct toward any other Hammond family member or their children. I read that clause 6 times, then I deleted it. This wasn't about morality. This wasn't about revenge. This was about business. I rewrote the terms. $156,000 annually, 2-year renewal period, standard termination clauses, nothing personal, nothing emotional. Just the fair market value of intellectual property that I owned and they needed. I sent the formal notice on September 15th. The phone started ringing on September 16th. Drake called first. I let it go to voicemail. Prue, what the hell is this? I just got a letter from some company, Meridian something, saying our licensing fees are tripling? This has to be a mistake. Call me back. Dad called an hour later. I let that one go to voicemail too. Prudence, this is your father. Drake showed me some letter about the patents. I don't understand what's happening. Those are our patents. Call me immediately. Mom called that evening. Prudence Ann Hammond, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to stop it right now. Your brother is very upset. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. This is not how family behaves. I deleted all 3 voicemails without responding. The formal response came a week later. Drake's corporate attorney, a man named William Chen, according to the letterhead, sent a 14-page letter challenging the validity of the licensing agreement, the ownership of the patents, and my authority to modify any terms. I responded with 47 pages of documentation. The original patent applications, filed in my name as the inventor's representative and assigned to Meridian Intellectual Holdings, or a LLC, from inception. The licensing agreement, signed by Gerald Hammond Sr. on behalf of Hammond Family Printing Company, clearly acknowledging Meridian's ownership and agreeing to the original terms. 5 years of payment records showing Hammond Printing had consistently paid the licensing fees to Meridian without dispute. The final page was a simple summary. The patents are valid. The ownership is clear. The licensing agreement permits modification of fees upon renewal. The new terms are effective January 1st. William Chen called me directly after receiving my response. Ms. Hammond, he said, I've reviewed your documentation. It's thorough. I'm a patent attorney, Mr. Chen. Thoroughness is my job. Your family doesn't seem to have understood the nature of this arrangement. No, I agreed. They didn't. The new fees, $156,000 annually, that's a significant increase. It's below market rate, I said. I can provide comparable licensing agreements if you'd like to review them. A long pause. That won't be necessary. I'll advise my client of the situation. Drake showed up at my house on a Saturday morning in October. I was making pancakes for Marcus when the doorbell rang. Through the window I could see Drake's Tesla in the driveway, his $300 pocket square visible even from 20 feet away. Stay here, sweetheart, I told Marcus. Keep an eye on the pancakes. I opened the front door but didn't step aside. Drake looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled. I'd never seen Drake in a wrinkled shirt in my entire life. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About what?" "Prue, you're trying to destroy the family business. I'm renegotiating a licensing agreement. You're tripling our costs. Do you have any idea what that does to our margins?" "We can't absorb that kind of increase. We'll have to raise prices, cut staff." "Those are business decisions," I said. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." Drake's hands balled into fists at his sides. "This is about the tour, isn't it? About Marcus?" I kept my voice steady. "This is about fair market value for intellectual property." "Bull." Drake stepped closer. I didn't move. "This is about you being jealous. It's always been about you being jealous. Dad gave me the company because I earned it, and you've never been able to accept that." "You earned it?" I repeated. "Yes." "By having a 2.8 GPA and a Y chromosome." "By working. By being there. By signing licensing agreements you didn't read," I said. "By using patents you didn't file. By building a competitive advantage you didn't create." Drake's face went pale. "Those patents are Dad's work. Dad's innovations. My patents. My filings. My $14,000 in fees. My shell company that's held the ownership since 2019. You can't." "I can. I did. And now I'm charging fair market value for something I've given away for free for 5 years. If you've ever given everything to people who gave nothing back, you know exactly what I was feeling in that moment." Drake stood on my porch, mouth opening and closing, looking for words that wouldn't come. "The new terms are effective January 1st, I said. "If Hammond Printing can't afford them, I'm happy to license the patents to one of your competitors. I've already had inquiries." That wasn't true, but Drake didn't know that. "You're bluffing. Try me. I'll sue." "With what grounds?" "Your own attorney already confirmed the documentation is airtight. The patents are mine, Drake. They've always been mine. You just never bothered to notice." Drake's voice dropped. "What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry about the tour. I'll put Marcus on the list for next year. I don't want Marcus on your list," I said. "I don't want your apology. I don't want anything from you except $156,000 annually, paid quarterly, for the use of intellectual property that belongs to me. We can't afford that. Then find patents that don't belong to me." Drake stared at me. For the first time in our entire lives, I saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. "This will destroy us," he said quietly. "No," I said. "This will reveal that you were never as strong as you thought you were. The destruction was always there. I was just covering it up." I stepped back and placed my hand on the door. "Goodbye, Drake." "Prue, wait." The door closed softly. No slam. Just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. Through the window, I watched my brother stand on my porch for a full minute, staring at the closed door like he couldn't understand what had just happened. Then he turned and walked back to his Tesla. He didn't look back. Inside, Marcus was standing at the stove, carefully flipping a pancake with the concentration he brought to everything he did. "Who was at the door, Mom?" I looked at my son, my brilliant, curious, determined son. "No one important, sweetheart." The weeks following Drake's visit were quiet. My phone buzzed occasionally, Mom, Dad, Drake, numbers I didn't recognize. I let every call go to voicemail. I deleted the messages without listening. I removed myself from the family group chat, archived every email from Hammond family addresses, and changed my notification settings so nothing from them could interrupt my day. Marcus noticed the silence first. "Grandma hasn't called in a while," he said one evening, looking up from his homework. "No," I agreed. "She hasn't." "Did something happen?" I set down the brief I was reviewing and looked at my son. He deserved honesty, but he also deserved to be 10 years old. "Sometimes families go through changes," I said. "Sometimes people need space to figure things out." Marcus nodded slowly, the way he did when he was processing information. "Is this about the tour?" "It's about a lot of things." "I didn't really want to go anyway," he said. "Tommy's dad took us to the Science Museum last weekend. They have a whole exhibit on how printing works. The old kind, with the metal letters. It was really cool." I smiled. That does sound cool. Way cooler than a factory tour with Uncle Drake. He wrinkled his nose. He always talks to me like I'm stupid. You're not stupid. I know. He said it simply, like it was obvious, like he'd finally started to believe it. I just learned different. I watched my son turn back to his homework, his pencil moving steadily across the page. That night, after he was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and my laptop. The licensing deadline was approaching. Hammond Printing had until January 1st to accept the new terms or lose access to the patents. I'd heard through professional channels that they'd tried to find alternatives. Drake had hired 2 different firms to search for workarounds, existing patents they could license, new processes they could develop. Both searches came back empty. The 3 core patents weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable. The security printing process alone had taken my father 8 years to perfect. Without it, Hammond Printing couldn't fulfill their government contracts. Without the government contracts, they couldn't maintain their margins. Without their margins, they were just another small printing company in an industry that ate small companies for breakfast. December came cold and early. On December 15th, I received a certified letter from William Chen. Hammond Family Printing Company formally rejected the new licensing terms and would be allowing the agreement to lapse effective January 1st. I read the letter twice. They were calling my bluff. Except I hadn't been bluffing. On December 18th, I sent a formal inquiry to Meridian's patent licensing to 3 of Hammond Printing's largest competitors. The response was immediate. 2 companies requested meetings before Christmas. On December 22nd, I signed an exclusive licensing agreement with Thornton Graves Industrial Printing for $212,000 annually, plus a 2% royalty on all revenue generated using the patented processes. On January 2nd, Hammond Family Printing Company received notice that their license had been terminated and that the patents were now exclusively licensed to a competitor. I didn't call Drake. I didn't call my parents. I simply let the legal process unfold. The first layoffs at Hammond Printing happened in February. I heard about it through industry newsletters. 47 employees, mostly in the specialty printing division. The government contracts were canceled within 60 days of the license termination. Without the patented processes, Hammond couldn't deliver the security features the contracts required. By April, they'd lost their 2 largest commercial clients. The specialty work had been the company's calling card. When it disappeared, customers started looking elsewhere. Thornton Graves was happy to take the business. Drake sent me 1 email in March. 2 sentences. I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed 62 years of family legacy. I deleted it without responding. By summer, the house went on the market. Not Drake's house, my parents' house. The big colonial where I'd grown up, where I'd folded brochures while Drake played baseball, where I'd been told the business needed strong male leadership. They sold it for $847,000, which was $90,000 less than they owed on the reverse mortgage they'd taken out to fund Drake's business school education. Dad took a job consulting for a small print shop in the next county. 3 days a week, $22 an hour. He was 67 years old and working for someone else for the first time since 1982. Mom stopped speaking to me entirely. I learned through a cousin that she'd told everyone at church I'd stolen the family business, that I'd tricked Dad into signing away the patents, that I'd always been jealous of Drake's success. The cousin, Ryan, my uncle's son, called to tell me what she'd been saying. I don't believe her, he said. You were always the smart one, and I remember you working at that company when we were kids. You were there every summer, doing real work. Drake just showed up for photos. Thanks, Ryan. For what it's worth, most of us know the truth. Aunt Patricia has been making excuses for Drake since he was born. Nothing's ever his fault. In September, Hammond Family Printing Company was acquired by Thornton Graves Industrial for $2.3 million, less than a quarter of what it had been worth 2 years earlier. The acquisition included the building, the equipment, and the client relationships. It did not include Drake. Drake was offered a position as regional sales manager for the combined company's Midwest territory. Base salary of $67,000 plus commission. No equity, no corner office, no business cards with CEO under his name. He took the job. What choice did he have? I heard he'd had to sell the Tesla. He was driving a 10-year-old Honda now, putting miles on it for sales calls across 3 states. His wife Sierra had gone back to work, something she'd sworn she'd never do. Their kids were pulled from private school. The tuition was $24,000 a year per child, and they had 3. 1 year later, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Dad. Your mother doesn't know I'm reaching out. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better. Marcus deserved better. I should have seen it sooner." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. Some doors close, so better ones can open. Marcus turned 12 that spring. We celebrated with a trip to the Natural History Museum in the city. His choice. He spent 3 hours in the geology exhibit, asking questions that had the docents scrambling for answers. "Mom," he said on the drive home, "do you think I could be a scientist? Like study rocks or something? I think you could be whatever you want to be. Even though I'm slow at reading?" "You're not slow, you're thorough. Scientists need to be thorough." He grinned. "Miss Patterson says I ask better questions than anyone in class. She says curiosity is more important than speed." Miss Patterson is a smart woman. We pulled into our driveway, the driveway of the house I'd bought outright with the licensing revenue, a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard and a room painted the exact shade of blue Marcus had picked out himself. "Mom," Marcus said as we walked to the front door. "Yeah?" "I'm glad we don't see Uncle Drake anymore. He always made me feel bad about myself." He paused. "Do you miss them? Grandma and Grandpa?" I thought about the question. Really thought about it. "I miss who I wanted them to be," I said finally, "but I don't miss who they actually were." Marcus nodded like this made perfect sense. "That's sad," he said, "but I think it's okay to be sad about something and still know it was the right thing." I looked at my son, 12 years old and wiser than anyone in my family had ever been. "When did you get so smart?" I asked. He grinned. "I've always been smart. I just needed people to give me time to show it." That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the fireflies blink across the yard. The house was quiet. Marcus was asleep. The phone hadn't rung in months. I thought about the patents. The $212,000 a year that came in like clockwork. The 2% royalty that added another $89,000 annually. The money that had paid off my student loans, bought this house, filled Marcus's college fund. I thought about Drake and his Honda, driving across the Midwest, trying to sell printing services for a company that used to be his. I thought about my mother in a rented apartment, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter had betrayed the family. I thought about my father, 67 years old, working for $22 an hour and finally starting to understand that the daughter he'd overlooked had been the foundation all along. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. The next morning, Marcus woke up early and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, slightly overdone, but made with love. "I've been thinking," he said as I ate, "about that tour I never got to go on." I set down my fork. "Yeah? I'm glad I didn't go, because if Uncle Drake had let me in, I might have wanted to be part of that company. I might have spent my whole life trying to make them like me." He shrugged. "Now I get to figure out who I actually want to be." I looked at my son. My brilliant, curious, determined son. "That's exactly right," I said. He smiled. "I know. I told you. I've always been smart." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The cut was clean. Some doors close so better ones can open, and I never regretted a single second of it.